Johnny Carson had been hosting The Tonight Show for 30 years. 30 years of monologues, celebrity interviews, political humor. He'd perfected the art. The timing. The ability to make every guest feel comfortable no matter how nervous they were. He'd interviewed presidents and rock stars, comedians and athletes, icons and unknowns. He knew how to handle awkward silences, unexpected revelations, even the occasional disaster. Nothing rattled him anymore. But on January 10, 1979, something happened that Johnny Carson would never forget. The show had been running smoothly that night. The monologue landed well. The audience was warm. Everything was on schedule. Then came the announcement that made the entire studio shift in their seats. Ed McMahon's voice carried across the studio with unusual gravity. "Ladies and gentlemen, John Wayne." The applause was immediate and thunderous. Not the polite clapping reserved for most guests. This was different. This was reverence. This was America saying goodbye to one of its last great heroes. Because everyone in that studio knew something the home audience might not have fully grasped yet. John Wayne was dying. He'd been diagnosed with stomach cancer earlier that year. The surgery had been brutal. The recovery uncertain. But Wayne had insisted on making one more appearance. One more chance to talk to America. And he'd chosen Johnny Carson's stage to do it. Wayne walked out slowly. Not with the confident swagger that had defined him in dozens of westerns. But with the careful, measured steps of a man whose body was betraying him. He wore his trademark cowboy hat. A rugged jacket. The costume of the American icon he'd spent 50 years becoming. Johnny stood up from behind his desk. Extended his hand. Wayne took it. The handshake lasted a beat longer than usual. A moment of private communication between two men who understood what was happening here. Then Johnny gestured to the guest chair. The comfortable seat where thousands of guests had sat over 3 decades of shows. "Duke, please sit down," Johnny said, using Wayne's famous nickname. John Wayne looked at the chair. Looked at Johnny. And shook his head. "I'll stand if you don't mind, Johnny." The studio went quiet. Not the dramatic silence of a planned moment. The confused, uncertain silence of an audience that didn't understand what was happening. Johnny's smile faltered slightly. Not with annoyance. With concern. "Duke, you don't have to stand. Please sit. Be comfortable." Wayne's voice was steady but different from the booming authority everyone remembered. "I appreciate that, Johnny. But I need to stand. I have something to say, and I need to say it on my feet." Johnny Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. Johnny didn't argue. Didn't make a joke to ease the tension. Just nodded slowly. Stepped back. Gave Wayne the floor. The cameras adjusted slightly, framing Wayne in the center of the shot. Standing. Alone. A 71-year-old man refusing to sit down because sitting down meant admitting something he wasn't ready to admit yet. "Folks," Wayne said, addressing the audience directly, "I know you've heard about my health. The cancer. The surgery. All of it. And I appreciate the letters. The prayers. The good wishes. I really do." The audience was completely still. You could hear the ambient hum of the studio lights. The distant mechanical whir of the cameras. Nothing else. "But I didn't come here tonight to talk about dying," Wayne continued. "I came here to talk about living. About what matters when you know your time's running out." Johnny had moved back to his desk, but he wasn't sitting either. He stood beside it, one hand resting on the wood, the other hanging at his side. Listening. Not as a host. As a witness. "I've made over 170 movies," Wayne said. "Played cowboys and soldiers and tough guys. Made a career out of pretending to be strong. And for 50 years people bought it. Believed it. Made me into something I never really was. An American hero. A symbol. An icon." He paused. Took a slow breath. "But the truth is, I'm just a man. Same as any of you. Same fears. Same doubts. Same mortality. The difference is, you all watched me pretend to be invincible for half a century. And maybe some of you started to believe it. Started to think that if John Wayne could beat the bad guys, survive the gunfights, save the day, then maybe America could too. The camera operator closest to Wayne was crying, trying to keep the camera steady while tears ran down his face. The audience sat frozen. This wasn't an interview anymore. This was a confession. A reckoning. I'm standing here tonight, Wayne said, because sitting down feels like giving up. And I'm not ready to give up yet. Not on myself. Not on this country. Not on the idea that we can still be the people we tell ourselves we are. Johnny's jaw was tight. His eyes glistened, but he didn't look away from Wayne. Didn't try to interrupt or redirect. Just held space for whatever needed to be said. Johnny, Wayne said, turning slightly to address Carson directly, you've had me on this show more times than I can count. And every time we laughed. Told stories. Made people smile. That's what you do. That's your gift. You make people forget their troubles for half an hour. But tonight I need to ask you to do something different. What do you need, Duke? Johnny's voice was quiet. Respectful. Wayne reached into his jacket pocket. Pulled out a folded piece of paper. Old. Worn. The edges soft from years of handling. This is a letter my father wrote to me when I was 20 years old. Right before I left Iowa for California to try to make it in pictures. He died 2 years later. Never saw me become whatever this is. He gestured vaguely at himself. The icon. The legend. In this letter, Wayne continued, my father told me 3 things. First, stand up straight. Because a man who stands up straight can face anything. Second, tell the truth, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And third, when you're scared, don't hide it. Fear's not shameful. Running from it is. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny walked out from behind his desk. Crossed the stage slowly. Stood next to Wayne. Not taking over. Not redirecting. Just standing with him. Shoulder to shoulder. The host and the guest. 2 men in their 70s who'd both spent lifetimes performing. Now just being present. I'm scared, Wayne said. Simple. Direct. I'm scared of dying. I'm scared of pain. I'm scared that when I'm gone, all those movies won't matter. That the things I stood for, or tried to stand for, will just fade away like they never existed. He looked out at the audience. But I'm standing here tonight because my father told me to stand up straight. And I'm telling you the truth, even though it's hard. And I'm not hiding my fear. Because maybe, just maybe, if John Wayne can stand here and admit he's terrified, then some kid watching at home who's going through something hard can stand up too. Can face it. Can admit they're scared and do the thing anyway. The silence in the studio was absolute. 300 people holding their collective breath. Millions watching at home, frozen on their couches. This wasn't entertainment. This was witnessing something sacred. Something raw. Johnny put his hand on Wayne's shoulder. Brief. Firm. A gesture of solidarity. Duke, you're one of the bravest men I've ever met. Not because you played heroes. But because you're standing here telling the truth right now. Wayne nodded slowly. I hope so, Johnny. I hope when people remember me, they don't just remember the cowboy. They remember that the cowboy was scared too. But he stood anyway. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Wayne carefully refolded the letter. Put it back in his pocket. I'm going to sit down now, he said. Not because I'm giving up. But because standing took everything I had left. And that's okay. Knowing when to stand and when to rest, that's wisdom, not weakness. He lowered himself into the guest chair slowly. Carefully. The audience watched every movement. When he was finally seated, when he'd caught his breath, the entire studio erupted in applause. Not polite applause, Thunderous. Sustained. A standing ovation for a man who just sat down. Johnny returned to his desk. Composed himself. When he spoke, his voice was different. Duke, I've interviewed a lot of people on this show. Thousands. But I've never heard anyone speak with more honesty than what you just gave us. Thank you? Wayne smiled. Tired but genuine. Thank you for letting me stand, Johnny. Literally and figuratively. Always, Johnny said. For you, always. They talked for another 10 minutes. About movies. About family. About legacy. But the weight of that opening moment hung over everything. The moment when John Wayne had refused to sit down because sitting meant surrender. And surrender wasn't in his vocabulary. Not yet. When the segment ended, when they cut to commercial, Johnny did something he rarely did. He left his desk. Walked over to Wayne. Helped him stand. And hugged him. Long, tight. The kind of hug that says, I see you. I understand. You're not alone. The crew pretended not to watch. Gave them that moment. Private. Sacred. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. During the commercial break, Wayne pulled out the letter again. Handed it to Johnny. I want you to have this, he said quietly. Johnny's eyes widened. Duke, I can't. This is from your father. This is exactly why you should have it. Wayne interrupted. You've got years left, Johnny. Decades, maybe. And when you're tempted to sit down when you should be standing up, I want you to remember tonight. Remember that it's okay to be scared. But you stand anyway. Johnny took the letter with shaking hands. I'll keep it safe. I know you will. They never spoke about it publicly. Johnny never mentioned it in interviews. Never showed the letter on air. But years later, after Johnny retired, after he'd left The Tonight Show and retreated from public life, a reporter asked him what moment from 30 years of hosting stood out most. Johnny didn't hesitate. The night John Wayne refused to sit down. That was the night I understood what courage really looked like. Not pretending you're not afraid, but standing up straight even when you're terrified. John Wayne died 5 months after that appearance. May 1979. The letter from his father was buried with him. Johnny had returned it. Slipped it into Wayne's jacket pocket at the funeral. A private moment. A final gift. But Johnny kept a photocopy. Framed it. Hung it in his home office where nobody but him would see it. And on days when the weight of everything felt too heavy, when sitting down and giving up seemed easier than standing and facing it, he'd read those 3 rules. Stand up straight. Tell the truth, even when it's hard. When you're scared, don't hide it. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The night that episode aired, America watched a dying icon stand on a soundstage and admit he was afraid. And something shifted. Letters poured in. Not to NBC. To cancer wards. To hospices. To hospitals. People who were facing their own mortality found courage in John Wayne's refusal to sit down. One letter, sent to The Tonight Show and forwarded to Johnny, read, I watched Mr. Wayne stand when he could have sat. Tomorrow I'm starting chemo. And I'm going to stand too. Thank you. Johnny kept that letter with the photocopy of Wayne's father's words. 2 pieces of paper that reminded him what television could be when it stopped entertaining and started witnessing. Years later, young hosts would ask Johnny for advice. He'd always say the same thing. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone stand when they need to. Even if it breaks the format. Even if it stops the show. Because some moments are bigger than television. John Wayne stood because sitting meant surrender. Johnny Carson let him because understanding meant more than protocol. And America watched a cowboy admit he was scared and loved him more for it. The guest chair remained empty that night. A symbol. A reminder. That courage isn't fearlessness. It's standing up straight when everything in you wants to fall down.